All righty, and we are live. Welcome everybody to this Heartcount webinar. We're so excited and happy that you are with us for this talk on how to create a happy workplace, specifically in hospitality and retail, which is I probably don't have to tell you that that those are a couple of industries that have, so we would say, some challenges around happiness at work and maybe a legacy of not being all that happy. But also some of the industries where there's a lot of potential if you can create a happy workplace. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And that's why I'm so happy that we're joined by an awesome friend of mine called Monika Hilm. Hi, Monika.
Hi, everyone.
How are you today?
So nice to be with you.
Hey, so glad that you're here. How are you today?
I'm very good. And even better now when I see you, because we haven't seen each other for a long time.
Yes, goddamn coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Monika is, she's run many hotels in her over 20-year-long career in the hotel industry. Currently, she runs Yasuragi Hotel, the Yasuragi Hotel in Sweden, which explains her wonderful, could you show off your Japanese? Yeah, that's very nice. And the poster behind you, what does that mean, Monika?
It means happy, beautiful.
Oh, love it. Did you put that up just for this webinar, or was that always there?
No, it's actually always there. And it's just symbolically nice when you have so many digital meetings to have something Japanese on the wall behind you.
Yes, good thinking. Monika has a wonderful approach, and we're going to talk all about that, to how do you create a happy workplace. And not only, and for her, it's not only an approach, she's actually been doing it in practice in a lot of hotels around the world. So that is what we're going to talk about. And Monika is also the author of a wonderful book called Put Your People First, which you should absolutely read, because that book is amazing too and has a lot more tips in it that we're going to cover today. Here's how it's going to work. We have about 45 minutes. So Monika and I will talk for about half an hour, maybe, sharing a lot of her best tips and ideas. And then we're going to take we can take questions from you guys. If you have a question along the way, just type it in the chat, and we will get to those questions at the end of the webinar. We are filming this, and we will share the video afterwards. So if you want to share this later with somebody else, the video will be sent to you. Awesome. Let's do this. Monika, your book is called Put Your People First. How can you say that? Everybody knows that the customer is king. Everybody knows that the customer comes first. Everybody knows that the customer is always right. How can you say that? What is wrong with you?
What is wrong with me? Many things are wrong with me, but let's not go into me personally, because that's not what we are here to talk about. But I didn't say this first, right? I think Herb Keller from Southwest Airlines was a pioneer in the 50s. I think more famously, Richard Branson has really taken that on and made it his thing. I'm hoping that within the hospitality industry, I've taken it a little bit further by genuinely saying, if we focus on the employees in the hotel, simply put, and that means in every action we take, the customer will be happier. And we all know that if the customer is happier, they spend more money, and the shareholders and owners will be happier. But in order to make the customers and the guests really happy, we have to make sure the employees feel happy, because they will then give it through with their heart out to the guests. And that means simple things like policies that you have has to apply to everyone, so the employees feel comfortable. And that's why I put that in capital letters: put your people first, no matter which service industry you're in or production industry.
Yes, I think that applies everywhere. But I think it's fair to say that this is not the traditional thinking in hotels, right? What are hotels more often like?
Traditionally, the hierarchy in hotels has always been the same. Since mass tourism came around in the 50s, the hotel industry has always been the boss, who is the ultimate decision maker. And then he's lieutenants, almost like the military, giving orders down in the rank. And the guests have learned this, and they have learned that if they scream well enough, it will go up the ranks, and it end up with the top manager, who will give whatever is needed to get these uncomfortable people away from them.
Yes. And what is wrong with that approach? Why because you've worked in hotels where that was the approach. Why does that not work? What's wrong with it?
Well, it doesn't work because people become extremely demotivated. And if people are demotivated, they don't do their jobs. And ultimately, that means the top management get a lot more work, because everything ends up with you. And this is
Yeah.
why I was sitting a couple of years ago at this hotel hospitality seminar, and there was a GM. It doesn't matter which country or hotel he was from, standing there saying, I have to live in the hotel, I have to sit in the bar, I always have to be present, because if I'm present, things will go well. So ultimately, leadership who are not putting their people first, they end up working a lot more. Now, I enjoy my free time as well, as much as I love being in hotels. Therefore, I do it as a self-preservation.
Right. So it's not just about making things better for the employees. It's actually also your job becomes easier because now your employees can think for themselves and you don't have to be in the hotel every hour of every day.
Exactly. So it's really, but it's the unmotivated people, and you know this better than anyone, Alex. Unmotivated people do not perform happily,
No.
and therefore not as well. And if we want our employees to perform well, we have to make sure they have the tools for it.
Here's what I think I see in a lot of places in retail and hospitality is that you try to fix the problem with service concepts. So then you try to define, this is how you greet a new customer or a new guest. This is how you do this. This is how you do that. And then employees are expected to follow that to the letter. But the problem is that if the employee hates being there, they can follow that script to the letter, but it's still going to be bad customer service because you can tell that they don't want to be there.
Yes.
Does that sound familiar at all?
For sure. They don't want to be there. And also they don't learn how to handle situations that are not in the fixed policies. And most situations are not fixed because we're talking about humans.
Yeah.
So they don't know what to do and they get bored.
Yeah.
And I think what interests me is that this particularly applies to younger people. They don't necessarily hunt the title, but they want to be in charge of what they do. They don't want to be told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is the challenge of being a leader today. The young people don't want to be told what to do. And unfortunately, when we were starting off in the 90s, unfortunately that long ago, we got used to being told what to do. And we were told what to do and we were doing it quite well. The young people today, and I admire them so much for standing up for themselves, that they don't want to be told. So we kind of have to do this. Otherwise,
Yes.
they're not going to want to work with us. And the hospitality employs majority of the under 25. We are very often their first employer.
Yeah. Young people today are awesome. Absolutely. And they can think for themselves if you let them.
Yes.
So the advantages of creating a happy workplace when you're dealing directly with customers are clear because, people, your employees can think for themselves. They want to go above and beyond. They want to help the client, and their happiness infects the guests, the customers, the clients. I think that's fantastic. I think, and that's of course on top of all the other advantages that go in every industry, which is like lower absenteeism, higher employee retention, higher productivity, and so on. We know this from a ton of research that happy employees do a better job. My question is how do you do it in your experiences in the workplaces that you've been? What have you seen work like on a practical day-to-day basis? What does this look like?
And I think it's really starting with the basics, which is not complicated stuff. It's really about looking through the policies. Do you have different policies for management than employees, and why? It can be something so silly as where you park your car.
Yeah.
And if it's not the guest park that parks closest to the hotel, it's the management. Now, why should I walk shorter distance than the rest of the people? Those are really pathetically simple basics, but you really have to start with the basics. So you go through all the policies and then you start digging into specific things like what are the complaints guests are talking about? What are the things that doesn't work? And then you look at how many of those things ends up with top leadership. And then you started going backwards and finding out how can you change so that the employees can offer something in the beginning or have the right authority to make the decision. And once you've set that policy, you need to make sure that the leadership then follows it too. So that when it goes from an employee all the way up, I cannot start changing it.
No.
And if I realize that something is wrong with the policy along the way, then I don't just tell it to the guest and run over the employees. I go back to the employee. I explain why I've realized that my policy was wrong. They haven't done anything wrong. And I give them the opportunity. Do they want to go back to the guest or should I get back to the guest? But we do it in connection together so that they feel that what they have made the effort on doing. Really, it's basic respect for their work of trying to discuss with the clients. I mean, it's so disgusting, Alex, when you find all these journalists who are writing how to make the best complaint to a hotel to get what you want. And this is what we need to break in order to support the employees that are front-faced with the guests.
Yes. And I think this is so you see this in so many cases, right? A guest demands something that they're not entitled to. The employee, in perfect accordance with regulation, says, sorry, I can't give you that. And the first thing the guest says is, I want to talk to your manager. And what so often happens is that then the manager just rolls over. The managers, this is unpleasant, with the customer's always right. We need to fix this. And the manager will just give them whatever. And what I've heard again and again and again from employees is that they see that as a betrayal. I was just doing my job. I was just standing up to this really rude and unpleasant person, doing the job you told me to do. And then you come around and then you just give them you give this unpleasant person exactly what they wanted. That, I think that more than anything else can kill employees' spirits.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And you know what? A little add to that. I think the employees are so much better at dealing with customer complaints than managers.
Yeah.
Because they deal with the customers every day, all the time. I mean, honestly, I was just talking to one customer today, and I have to admit, I felt a little bit, how am I going to deal with this? But I bet you my front office manager, she doesn't feel like that at all because she deals with customers all the time. So if you give them the opportunity, they will do it much better than we will.
Yeah.
I honestly believe that.
I saw a fantastic example of that from a different industry. This is from an internet provider, a website provider. They provide technical websites for big technical services for big websites.
Yeah.
And they have, in the case that there's been an outage, that the website has been unavailable for a while, the customer is entitled to ask for some form of compensation. And they had a policy where that request would go to a manager who would then approve it, and the answer would go back to the client. But they changed the policy so that their frontline employees could now directly approve a certain amount of compensation without going to a manager first. The customer service employee could do that directly. And because the customer service employee knew the customer better and had more experience with that, it actually turned out that they ended up giving less refunds, less compensation than before, because the employee had a better sense of what was fair and what would make the customer happy in that situation. And of course, it makes the employees proud because they feel trusted. I can make decisions. I have responsibility. I am trusted to make this call.
Exactly.
Yeah. Similar policies for employees and managers. Could you, again, your uniform is an expression of that, right? How does that work at your hotel, Yasuragi?
Well, Yasuragi has all the guests wearing the same yukatas, which is not a kimono. It's a cotton version, a simpler version. So we ask all the guests to wear the same clothes. And when I arrived here in January, leadership and management were wearing suits, and all the employees were wearing these Japanese work clothes. And I changed that. So we all now, including leadership, wear the same. So in front of the guests, we all look the same regardless of who we are, because we should all be able to help them. And all the guests wear the same. So to me, that was quite logical that we wear the same, because that's also what we're asking for the customers.
I love that. And we should say Yasuragi is a Japanese-themed spa in Sweden.
Yes. Yes, it is. It's
Yes.
a Japanese bathing house, actually. It's we don't use the word spa
Okay.
internally
Okay.
because we take on the Japanese bathing experience here. And
And
we
like
want to
an
differentiate ourselves from all the regular spas. Everybody can call themselves a
uh,
spa nowadays. So we try to be a little bit different.
nice. So creating that equal footing between employees and managers, having those processes, procedures in place, and making sure that they're enforced, that you don't just steamroll your employees. What are some other things that you do to make your employees happy at work?
Well, there's various things. I think it starts with listening
Mm-hmm.
and understanding. So when I came here, for example, I always start with the managers and ask them what's going on and go through with them, and to get the temperature, the feeling of where they stand today. I look at things like how much holiday the employees have had.
Mm-hmm.
That is a quite good sign of healthiness in a company. I think there should be a KPI for this. I haven't seen a hotel company that have put that KPI on a manager. Does all the employees have their holidays? To
Uh-huh.
me, that's
Uh-huh.
a KPI.
Uh-huh.
I also look at listening into the organization. Things like using Heartcount
Mm-hmm.
is something we've started using here as well, to find out what the people are saying
Yeah.
and get the feedback on a regular basis. I think that's exceptionally important.
Yes.
But also go and have lunch with the employees. Don't just sit with the leadership, and then
Mm-hmm.
find out what they do. And then I learned from somebody at one of the conferences about the 3 coins, and I still do that because I think it's so powerful to remember to give thanks to 3 people every day.
Could you explain
Now,
the 3 coins, please? How does that work?
I have 3 coins on my desk. Like here, I have Swedish coins, and
Mm-hmm.
when I've given somebody a good feedback, like
Yeah.
positive feedback, I turn it over, and hopefully all
Ah.
3 coins should be turned by the end of the day.
Yeah.
And maybe 3 sounds very little, but if you do that every day, and we have about 200 employees in this hotel, hopefully I should get through quite a few of them within a year.
Yeah.
So if you do something every day, I think it sits in the little things you do. Make yourself available.
Mm-hmm.
Work with your door open. Say thank you when people do things, and take a deep breath if you want to say something negative. And then
Yeah.
never, and of course, like we've talked about many times, never mix the good and the negative. If you have
Yes.
something negative to say, just say that and stay with it. Or if you say something good, stay with it and just stay with that. And don't start, but you could also improve this. Or, but I hate
Yeah.
that.
And the reason we say that is some people advocate that you have to give this feedback sandwich, right? If you want to give somebody negative feedback, first you praise them. You're an exceptional employee, and then you give them the negative feedback, and then you give them the positive feedback at the end. Some people seriously advocate that you should give negative feedback like that. That is a
And the person
terrible
is only,
idea.
yes. And the
Yeah.
person just sits and wait for the negative to come. What is it that you want to tell me? And they don't hear you.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
you
So
are very
so
right.
so give negative feedback when you have it, give positive feedback when you have it, and try to give more positive than negative feedback, because negative feedback hits people harder than positive feedback
It does.
does. Yeah.
And
So
maybe it
listening.
should.
Yeah. Sorry.
Maybe it should. Maybe it should, because I don't think, a lot of people, when they think about happiness and these kind of things, they think we should go around and be happy all the time. But when you have something constructively negative, or constructively, you pick the word, I think you should really do it seriously.
Yeah.
And really, in a nice, polite way, but be very serious about it, because we still have a job to do, and we all have to do it. Even if I'm very focused on employees, I'm also very demanding. I
Yeah.
demand the results, I demand numbers, I demand things to happen. And I think many out there, not you and me, Alex, but a lot of people mismatch these 2 things. And they think that if you are an advocate of happiness and that you should be positively thinking, you shouldn't complain. Well,
Yeah.
I totally disagree. I think we should. And I think we should hold people to the same standards as ourselves, but hold them to it, and continuously holding them to it in a very
Yes.
serious way. At the same time, do it in a polite and nice way, and with a lot of laughters in between.
Yeah. And I think the crucial difference here is that it's not about being happy every second of every day, Because if you pull an employee aside and said, I saw how you handled that situation, that wasn't very good. Here's what went wrong. Here's what you might do better than the next time. That might not feel good in the moment, but hopefully that employee can then do a better job next time, and that will feel better over time. So it's not happiness every second of every day. It's the maximum happiness over time. And I can't stress this enough. Not telling people what they can do better is really mismanaging them. And will not make anybody happy, because then it will continue to do a bad job, and nobody wants to do a bad job. If there's something that makes us happy, it's to do a good job, to actually know that I make a difference. I create value. I can help the clients. I can help the guests. My values, my efforts are valuable. That's incredibly important.
And you build better relationship. I just have to, I don't know if you remember, Alex, but when I told you the story about the guy who thanked me for firing him.
No, tell us that story.
So I had when I was working in my previous hotels, I had an F&B manager who was really not working out the way we've been trying to do.
And for those who don't know, F&B is?
Food and beverage manager.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
So the food and beverage manager was not working out at all as we had planned. The creativity was missing. The team spirit wasn't there. So I brought him into my office, and we had a very good constructive conversation about why I hired him and what is he performing today and how the mismatch was there. Then he went away and thought about it for a while, and then he came back after a week, and I told him I really don't think this is going to work. So I told him I would like him to leave, and he turned around and thanked me for the feedback. And 2 years later, he contacted me and asked me to be his reference for a visa to Australia. And he thanked me because he had then 2 years later realized that he had, based on our conversation, gone on and done something he was much better at. He became a retail manager of Marks and Spencer for 2 countries. And then he moved on with Marks and Spencer to Australia. And it was really because we had that conversation, what he was good at and what he was bad at. And I ended up letting the guy go, but I was one of his references. And that shows me that it's so important to take those conflict conversation, and something good can come out of it if you bring it out from the right place in you.
Yeah. And also that I honestly think that, and this is so important, that part of running a good workplace is getting rid of the people who don't belong there, either because they can't do their jobs very well, or because they don't, or because they don't fit into the culture. You're not doing anybody a favor by letting people stay in a job where they're not happy and they're not performing, because it affects everyone around them. It affects the whole workplace. Yeah. And as long as you keep them in this job where they're not very happy and not performing very well, you're keeping them from finding that other job that might be much better for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because people know and feel if they're not doing a good job. I mean, we're fooling ourselves if we think that people don't know. Of course they know.
Yeah.
It's like our kids. They know where they've gone wrong. They just don't want to admit it. Principle. Employees or kids, same thing.
Too true. Though I will also say that people know if they're doing a bad job, but a lot of people actually don't know that they're doing a good job if nobody tells them. I think there is a huge lack of feedback in general in most workplaces, and definitely a lack of positive feedback.
For sure.
Excellent. So we talk about listening to people. We talk about giving people feedback. I think that's crucial, and helping them live up to their full potential, do a good job. What are some other things you've done in your hotels?
What are some other things? I mean, I think leadership's responsibility is really make sure that the right people are there. And one of the things that I've done that I think is the coolest is that when we changed the recruitment process.
Yeah.
And we created groups of recruiting where these employees were partially involved and responsible for recruiting their bosses.
Yes.
That I think is the ultimate power you can give your employees, that they get to choose who they are going to work next to, because they have to work with this person every day. So if I just put 2 people who don't like each other next to each other, it's not going to be good.
No.
So if they get to be involved in hiring their colleagues or their boss,
yeah,
you will work much better with them. And you can't come back and complain because you were part of the decision making.
Which idiot hired that fool? Oh, it was me.
Wasn't just the boss.
Can you?
So it's voluntarily inclusive accountability, I call it.
Yeah. How do you do it specifically? How does that work? How do your employees hire their own bosses?
So if you know you're going to recruit, let's take the F&B, food and beverage manager, as an example. When this person left and we were hiring a new person, I put together a group of from different departments that would interact with this person. And they were asked to come up with 2-3 things that they thought was important in their interaction with this position. And then this group, 4 or 5 people, met all the candidates in a group discussion. So they didn't sit as a group panel interviewing this person, which would be horrible.
Yeah.
So they were sitting around a table discussing the position, and everybody brought out their points. And the person who was being interviewed was actually only part of the conversation and was butting in and came with comments as they felt appropriate. And through the discussions, the people got a feeling for who is this person and do they want to be with them. Then HR did their regular interview, and I did a meeting. And then all the people who were involved met, and we were rating the candidates. And the only one who wasn't allowed to rate officially was me, because then we know in certain places and certain countries, everybody will vote like the top manager. So therefore, I will held my vote. And if everybody was agreeing, then my vote never came to play.
I love it. What a cool process. Such a great idea. Any other tips, ideas? I should say that we have about 5 more minutes. So if there are any questions, remember to ask them in the chat. Any other cool tips, ideas?
Any other cool tips, ideas? We've done many different things together. I can't come up with one specific right now. We did cards in housekeeping.
Cards?
We used red, green, and yellow cards like a stoplight.
Yeah.
Where you could, if you were an employee and you were not feeling great today, you could hold up a red card in the morning meeting, and you were never asked why.
Yeah.
It just gave the manager indication that maybe you should clean somewhat less rooms today than the other day.
Yeah.
And that over time, if you constantly showing the red card, then maybe a conversation would be in place, but maybe not the first day to intimidate somebody. or go for walks. I'm really using a lot here in Sweden in particular now when it's getting darker. I take people for walks because people are more honest and open when they walk next to you rather than sitting over a cup of coffee and you staring at them.
True.
So I think those are the 2 quick, easy ones that I would do. If I was a manager out there and I wanted to get a feeling for how my people feel and think about the operation with me, I would go for a walk with them, or I would implement some kind of card system where we can talk without words.
Yeah. And of course, that's also what Heartcount basically does just once a week, is ask everybody, how are they doing? And you can see if there are any issues that you need to address. I think that's fantastic. I want to end with, I want to ask you, because you are now in Sweden at the Yasuragi Hotel. Before that, you were in Prague at the Praha Park Hotel, where I actually did stay, and it was fantastic. Such a great place. So I think something that says a lot about a leader is, what do people say when they leave? Are they like, yes, that asshole is gone? Could you talk a little bit about what happened when you were leaving I wasn't going to make you cry, but I might anyway. I'm sorry. What happened when you left that hotel?
Well, apart from that, I cried and ended up writing a blog about that. It's perfectly okay that leaders cry when they leave. When I left, the employees asked me to write my book because they sincerely felt that they had never had a leader like me. Probably because in the Czech Republic, the emotional side and the caring side is maybe not as developed as in some of the countries. It's a little bit of a colder, restrictive, hierarchic situation. So when I took out the restrictions and the hierarchy, people realized that they had a voice and they were allowed to be, which they really was going to miss. So they are actually the reason why I approached you and asked you if you could guide me a little bit in the beginning of writing my book. And I took a year out to do that because of them. And when I was leaving, and we had the party for leaving, a lot of the team members came up to me and asked me where I'm going next so they could come with. And that, I think, is the absolute nicest compliment you can get.
Yeah.
It's when the people say that they want to follow you to the next location. And I actually had 2 or 3 people who came with me to the next location.
That's
Not to Sweden,
wonderful.
but another location in Prague.
That's wonderful. I think one of the things that's so cool about your story is that you've managed to do this in a tough industry, hotels, but also in a tough culture, namely in Central Europe, in Prague, in the Czech Republic, where happiness at work is not really on the agenda at all, or at least it didn't used to be. I think it's definitely improving, and I see many good initiatives coming out of that region. But back then, it really wasn't. How did you make this part of the conversation, and what would your advice be to somebody who's, let's say, somebody who works in a hotel where this is not part of the conversation, or works in a country where this is still, happiness at work is still a weird idea? How do you get people on board? How did you make it happen?
How do you make it happen? Well, like everything else, you start with yourself. So you make yourself available and you are communicating how you want things to be. Now, if you are in the luxury position like me of being the leader of the hotel, you can do a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I have guided over LinkedIn, and I'm always open for people to talking to me there. I've guided a few people who've actually contacted me and said that their leaders were not doing this, and how should they behave and what should they do in order to improve their situation. And we talked about before that people might not know what they do well. Mm-hmm. I think what a lot of people miss is that the leader doesn't always understand and see what they're doing wrong. I think most leaders want to be good. They want to do a good job. They want to treat people well. Most people are not mean by nature. So they might not be aware of how their implications. So I always try to encourage talk. Mm-hmm. Go with a sincere, open mind, and don't go with a blaming approach. Go with an open mind of saying, I would like to do this differently. How can we together do that? And I think you will get a lot of the leaders with you. And I think that's really the starting point. It's to open up yourself and lead by example. That has to be the first step. And especially in a culture like Central Europe, where there is a lot of doubts and and a lot of mistrust, which we also seen during the pandemic with the leadership of the countries, there is a lot of mistrust for a reason. Mm-hmm. And if you can get them to trust, you have to trust by default until they prove you otherwise, and then show them that they can trust you, and they will come. But don't expect a quick fix in 2 weeks. It is not. It's you're in it for the long haul.
Yes, as I see it, this is not. I think you can see improvements fairly quickly, but you're never done. It's not like you can say, okay, happiness done, we don't have to do that anymore. It's something you keep doing and keep refining and keep improving on all the time.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. We have not really gotten any questions in the chat, which is good. I can only assume that means we explained everything perfectly. So I just want to end with one final question that I always like to ask, which is, what's in your entire process, what's been your proudest moment where you just knew, oh yeah, I'm doing something right?
There's so many moments, but really the most profound one that sticks out was when I parked the car outside Park Hotel one day because I was off, and I took the kids to the park. And then when I came back to the car, I walked through the hotels because my children really felt like they were at home. It was their second home. So we stopped by the bar and talked to the bartender. And then we walked towards the car. And there was a guy who came running after us. And he ran up to me and he said, "Are you the general manager of this hotel?" And I said, "Yes, I am." He shook my hand. And I thought, oh my God, what is he going to want to complain about? This is my off day, you know? And he said, "I just want you to know that I've stayed in your hotel for 5 days, and I totally understand why people rave about you in TripAdvisor, because the team is awesome. It feels great to be here. Everybody's so friendly. And when I ask them why, they say we have the best GM, and that's Monika." And that That was an amazing moment.
And I think that's proof that it works. Yeah, proof that it works, right? That this is something you do something for the employees do it for the guests, and the guests can feel it.
And the guests came running after me. I mean, it was so cool.
Yeah,
it was amazing. So
and that could and that might be my my challenge to all of you out there who may not work in hotels or in retail, is that if you are in a hotel or in a shop or in a restaurant, and they have amazing employees, somebody who's just gives great customer service, tell them, and maybe even write an email or go running after the man. Yes, go running after the manager. Make them point out the manager and come running up to them, because every time somebody's angry, the manager will hear about it. But when somebody's happy, 99 times out of 100, the manager will never hear it. So that would be an amazing thing to do. Yes. Monika, thank you for being awesome, and thank you for sharing your awesomeness. Where should people go to learn more about your approach? I mean, there's obviously your book.
Yes. MonikaHilm.com.
MonikaHilm.com.
Or look me up on LinkedIn if you have any specific questions. I coach quite a few people, but also people in other industries that I talk to about leadership in general, because I think that's so fascinating. And there are more things in common than that separates the different industries.
Yes.
So MonikaHilm.com or Monika Hilm on LinkedIn, and I surely will connect with you.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me, Alex. It's so good to see you again.
You
it's been
too.
too long. Let's catch up soon again.
I'll come to stay at your hotel.
Sounds good. You're more than welcome. Please come. Thank you.
Thank you.